And I would characterize my work as simplifying Peircean semiotics. So my purpose is to make it more approachable, explain it now in a simple way, if it's possible, make it approachable, and my audience is not academic audience, but I write for the general public. And this purpose stems from my background. So my background is in sociology, and I've been always interested in this question of how sort of very abstract, symbolic, philosophical systems manifest themselves in society. And take an example. If we would go to the street and stop a random person and press that person to answer some very metaphysical, philosophical question like, what is the fundamental nature of reality? I guess most people would in the end say, like, I guess matter, like, particles of matter, like, physics is the ultimate foundation of reality. So this is a materialist idea. It's a philosophical, metaphysical claim or belief in materialism. Now, that is sort of very detached from the experience of normal people. People don't usually think about metaphysical questions because they are so detached from the experience. But nevertheless, they are sort of implicit in our society in many ways. So that materialism is implicit in our society because we are so obsessed with matter. We want to buy new stuff, we want to get all kinds of new things from the shop, we are obsessed with material wealth and stuff. And that stems from that metaphysical belief, which is implicit in our society. Now, that's why I want to talk about Peircean things to the general public. I believe that if Peircean ideas, Peircean semiotics, were to be embraced more generally in our society, that would change our society for the better. So, if we would, following Peirce, think that the ultimate reality is actually mind, has the nature of mind, that would change our society. And I truly believe that the Peircean philosophy and Peircean thought could help us solve many of the problems that we face as a society. But I'm not going to give you a sort of a sociological analysis of our society or anything. That is just the background or the nature of my approach. Why I want to simplify Peircean thought, why I want to convey that to the general public. Now, if that's my purpose, it's a sort of a difficult task how to simplify Peirce, which is notoriously difficult and complex. So the first step is to produce simple frameworks. I have seen the complete periodic table of 66 signs, which looks very daunting. It's very, very complex. It's hard to approach, especially if you're just an ordinary man on the street. It's like, what is that thing you need? You have to make a lot of effort to get into it, have a lot of knowledge on semiotics, on semiotic concepts, like ergosim, this is sign, all that stuff. It's not approachable. So with simple frameworks. And my sort of idea is that if we have the 66 signs, that's the most complex, most complete description of semiosis. We can build sort of a continuum of diagrams and end up with something very, very simple. And that simple thing I'm going to present you as a very simple framework, which is nevertheless based on the complete logic. Now, that isn't enough, because now we have these frameworks that are on the abstract levels of systems, structures. We have to connect those to experience, because why people aren't interested in philosophical questions or maybe semiotics in general is that it doesn't connect with their experience. It has no meaning. Why should I learn this? It has no effect on my life. So we have to connect our experience with those structures. And this is one way to do it, but I found it to be sort of pedagogically really good, is to do phenomenological observations. So we have some kind of framework, semiotic framework. And then we begin to reflect our own experience through that framework, to observe certain aspects of our experience and connecting them to this framework. And by doing that, instead of then seeing relations between concepts, which are sort of cold and dead, we have experiences and relations between experiences. And then the framework becomes alive, living, and interesting, and something that is meaningful. And this is not done only for pedagogical reasons, but I believe that semiotics is a practice. It's not a purely intellectual pursuit. It's not a theory. It's something that we practice. It's a skill. As an analogy, think of Stoicism. It's not an intellectual pursuit. It's also a practice. You have to practice Stoicism. You have to implement Stoicism in your life to be a Stoicist. I think the same applies to semiotics. You have to apply semiotics to your life and cultivate that skill to see and feel semiosis. It's a skill that we need to practice. And I think this is exactly what Peirce is saying in this quotation. Peirce says, the reader must actually repeat my observations and experiments for himself, or else I shall utterly fail to convey my meaning. So it's not enough to read Peirce. We must follow Peirce and repeat those observations, repeat those experiments, and cultivate those semiotic skills so that we could truly see semiosis in our experience. Now, before I present the framework, there is one thing I want to emphasize about semiotics. You have heard that semiotics is a logic, and it's true, it's logic. But the word logic is very interesting because we have a sort of false conception of logic. When I say the word logic, that something is logical, many of us tend to think about calculations or computers or things like data from Star Trek is logical or Spock is logical. But that is not what we mean when we say that semiotics is logic. It's grounded in aesthetics. It's grounded in qualities of feeling, in aesthetic judgments, and that is the fundamental nature of that logic. So to really hit that point home, here's a beautiful AI-generated picture of a frosty autumn field. Now, I want you to imagine yourself on that field and sort of meditate with me for a while. What you feel? Now, you would feel a sort of a cold air, crispy, fresh, cold air that you would breathe in. It would feel very good. This is kind of a very fresh air. You would see these beautiful colors in the sky. Maybe you would hear a bird singing or something. It's a very aesthetical sort of experience, a very good sight. And all of those aesthetical perceptions would end up to become a qualitative, emotional inference of it's going to be a beautiful day. Now that was a logical inference, but it wasn't calculative. It wasn't sort of computational. It was a feeling. And you literally felt that it's going to be a beautiful day. And when I say, or when you hear that semiotics is logic, I want you to remember that this is logic. This is semiotic logic. So, here's the framework. It's 4 phases. 4 things. No semiotic concepts, no logic science, no this is science. No. 4 phrases, 4 words that are understandable for a common man. So, how do we get the 4 phases? Here is the 66 signs. And if you look at the periodic table, you will see here arrows. And these are the phases. We have the perception phase, the experience phase, the understanding phase, and finally the sharing. Now, we just want to look at the phases. We don't want to go into that kind of meaning detail. So here you see which of these signs belong to which phase. And what we're going to do, we're going to collapse all of these sides, the perception phase, all of these green sides to the experience phase, all of these light blues to understanding, and all of those dark blues to sharing. Then we have this effect, and then just to make it visually more appealing, and then have a semiotic framework based on the 66 signs, which is not daunting at all. We have 4 phases of perception, experience, understanding, and sharing. Now, what are the phases? They describe the abstractness of semiosis. So the higher you go, the more abstract your experience is, the more thirds you have. So these we understood as the vertical levels, metaphorically speaking, how far your mind is on the abstractness of semiosis, in which phase your mind is active. Now, I want to strongly emphasize that in reality, although we say that our mind is active at some phase, all of the phases are implicit all of the time. So there is this tendency for us semioticians, at least for me, to sort of classify too rigidly things into classifications, to say that this is that sign and this is that sign. This experience belongs to you. Where in fact, semiosis is a continuous phenomenon where everything is implicit at the same time, all the time. So we should think that this is sort of the most intensified aspect of that experience. Put this implicit in there. So that is a very, very important thing to remember. So let's begin to go through what this means. So we start from the bottom. We start from perception phase. This is a sort of experience, or type of experience where we are very actively perceiving immediately what is present in our surroundings. We are not even actively thinking. They are sort of lost or embedded in the perception itself. So you can think about boxing. If you're boxing or doing martial arts, you don't have time to think. Yes, I'm going to hit with the left, and then I'm going to hit with the right, and then you're already knocked out. You don't have time to think. You're just in a very embedded perceptual sense communicating with the environment. The same applies to music. With church, we have this kind of analogy of the jazz musicians. So it implies, it fits here perfectly as well. So you have a small group of musicians improvising. There is no time to think. There is no time to analyze. You're just perceiving and acting. And it's a very, very qualitative experience. You're listening to sounds. And I found this very nice quotation from Charlie Parker, that sort of famous jazz player, who says that master your instrument, master the music, and then forget all that bullshit and just play. And that is like very perception phase kind of quote. Then there is the experience of scanning the forest. Maybe you're hunting, you're trying to find deer, and you're scanning the forest, and that's a very perceptive experience. You're not thinking, you're just trying to find the deer in the forest. Or maybe you're trying if a coffee is hot. That moment of trying if that coffee is hot is a very good example of perception-based experience. Very qualitative. Or when you're searching for lost keys, you're trying to locate those keys, you're not able to think anything, you have a sort of a unpleasant emotion, and you're trying to locate those keys. Those are all examples of the perception phase. Then we go higher. There is more thirdness. Things become more abstract. We move to the experience phase. Now we see beyond the mere visual representation. Now the signs are saying something more than what they just look like. Signs become loaded with meaning. And this is sort of the classic semiotic stuff in this space. All the classic examples of traffic signs and dark clouds and stuff like that. So think about the clock. You see the clock, but you see more than just the clock. You see what time it is. There is meaning that goes beyond the visual presentation. And you know, it's clear because a small child cannot read the clock. It's not aesthetically there present. What it means is something that you not only perceive, but you experience the time. Or traffic sign, there is the aesthetic of the traffic sign, as Romanini had an example of that. There's the aesthetics of the traffic sign, which you see, which you experience it as a stop sign or as a red light. And that is more than just the visual appearance. Or you hear it wrong. It's not the sound, but the meaning of the doorbell that you experience. Or button icons in interfaces. There are two lines like this in your interface. That is what you perceive, but you experience a pause button. That's a pause button. Or a police. You see a person with certain color clothes, but you experience a police. Now, a dog wouldn't experience a police. A dog wouldn't experience a traffic sign. A dog would only have that aesthetical perception, but not the experience of it. Again, we go higher to the understanding phase. And now we're not concentrated on the presentation of things, not the tangible secondness of things, but on the general rules and tendencies and habits that guide situations. We rise to a new level of abstractness. We try to comprehend, we try to understand context-dependent patterns and tendencies. So there is a norm, there's a social norm. Now guiding this very situation. You know how you should behave. You shouldn't sleep or begin to shout or anything like that. You know how you should behave. There's a social norm guiding the situation we cannot see. We cannot touch it. We cannot point at it. But it's there, it's real. It's there. And we can comprehend that social norm. This is the understanding phase. For the traffic laws, you saw the traffic sign aesthetically in perception phase. You experience it as a stop sign, but now you can move higher and then begin to contemplate how these traffic rules actually guide this whole situation. Why the cars and people are not chaotic. There is an order. You are comprehending the traffic laws, but you cannot see them. You cannot point at them. You cannot touch them, smell them, but they are real. Or the rules of the game. You can watch a football game. You see the players, you see the referee, but there are rules governing the game that you can comprehend, but not see. This is the understanding of it. And finally, there's the sharing phase, which is symbolic. And here we have context-independent symbols. So symbols have tendencies that govern things across different contexts. So the rules of the football game were only governing the football game. But after the game, they are no longer governing this. But ideologies govern more generally. You have a totalitarian state with a totalitarian ideology. it will reshape all the social norms guiding all kinds of contexts. Or we have a constitution. Traffic laws control traffic. The constitution is a law of laws. It governs a much more general sort of area. Or we have culture, which shapes all kinds of social norms across all kinds of different contexts. And then they have like personality. So we have these social norms on. Now I'm presenting. So I have this, I'm a presenter. This is my social identity right now. When this is over, then I have some kind of another kind of identity. When I go to my workplace, I'm an employee. When I go to home, I'm a father. So we have these social norms, these marks that we call that are context dependent. Well, I'm still Markus. I'm the same person, which is context independent.
Just all of them are kind of happening simultaneously in every step back. Yeah. So in the example of scanning a beautiful field in the wintertime, when is ideology or constitution or culture emerging in those moments?
They, the phases are, yes, so they are very good. They're coming from the top of the bottom. But ideology cannot directly shape the perception, but it shapes through social norms that will shape how you experience them, which will shape your perception, so like what find worth of your attention, stuff like that. So it's a very sort of a tricky question to locate how that's there an ideology shapes our perception, but it's still there. But it has all these intermediate states. Right, it reaches that.
Well, I would maybe, the Nazis liked Beethoven about just like the Americans liked Beethoven about. So the ideology wasn't really constituting the aesthetic judgment of beauty within
it's not directly. It cannot do that. It has to do with intermediate basis.
So it goes from top to the bottom.
Yeah, this and this, and there's constant movement. The point is that this cannot directly influence perception. It has to go through experience. Now, the point which I started with, that there's this abstract symbol of discourse and there's a concrete experience and how we could connect these things. This becomes one too. Now we see that here's a very immediate perception, and there, the thought is very sort of symbolic, very, very abstract kind of realm of symbols. And there is continuous movement in this semiotic structure. So material, an ideology, and sharing, it's a very symbolic thing, it's a philosophical belief. But it's shaping our society, and this is sort of a preliminary sketch, don't take this too seriously. But we have all the social norms shaped by that ideology, like you should pursue a career with good salary. That's something you should do. Or we have this kind of social pressure to keep up with the trends, to have the newest gadgets. Or we judge parenting based on how many choices kids have. Or we value things based on their cost. That boils down to experience, in the sense that how we see things, we see them through prices. We see them as having monetary value. That's how we experience many objects. Or we may experience our co-workers as connections, how I would get a promotion. And this flows to perception. And this is a difficult question, like how does that shape our things? We may have sort of an attraction to novelty, in a weird sense that we like novel things, new things. And there may be, and this is sort of a sociological analysis, but a weird overemphasis on visual aesthetics. Like it doesn't matter how they really are, but it matters how it looks. This kind of an Instagram culture. But we see how these flow down. Yeah. And the point.
again, to emphasize, the continuous nature of semiosis is that we are not strictly on some phase, but we are constantly moving across all these phases. So, for example, now I'm speaking to you, you are pretty much here, sharing communication, you're concentrating on my words, on my message, which happens through symbols, through language. At the same time, you're perceiving me, still, you're experiencing me as a presenter of this presentation. You're understanding the social norms you have in this situation. But if mä rupean puhumaan suomea tosi nopeasti, niin teillä ei ole mitään hajua, mitä tapahtuu. So you see how you drop from that sharing phase down because you were suddenly perceiving what is he talking about, what are those qualities? I don't know what he's saying. So you see how you can quickly move in that structure. And this is sort of that was finished. And that was sort of a drop from the top to the bottom. But there is also sort of things that we would see as very conceptual experiences, which are actually very symbolic. Like if you taste wines and you are very trained sommelier, it's a very conceptual thing, like your experiencing qualities, but immediately those qualities are filled with all kinds of symbolic meanings, like this is this grape from this area, and this wine is from 2013, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about wines. So for me, that's just perception. That's like qualities, messy qualities. For sommelier, that's a very sort of abstract kind of experience. But yeah, that's the framework I wanted to present. It should be pretty simple. Should be something that is applicable and understandable, no simple terms. I hope somewhat doesn't make sense. For me, it makes sense. But yeah, that's like the bulk of my presentation. The rest of the slides are all I show you how you can make it a bit more minute, like make it a bit more complicated. And then I have slides of how you can produce different kinds of sign classifications from the 66 signs. So just to show you, you can take the next step if you want. If this isn't enough for semiotic analysis, because this is pretty crude. You can move to the 10 complete states. So again, 66 signs. Now we have the phases here. You know what they are. Then we have the periods. Now we can sort of collapse these to perception of communication, perceiving representation, perceiving boundary, experiencing communication, experiencing representation, experiencing presentation, understanding communication, understanding representation, and sharing communication. So 10 states. And let's just collapse them into those 10 states. And we get something like this. The same phases, but now we have depth. Like there are different kinds of perception. There are perception of things that are just presented, like an object. Like I have never seen this thing before. I have no idea what it is. That's a sort of a presented perception. But now I know that this is a pen or something like that. That's already a representation. So you get more minuteness in this. But this might not be necessary. Maybe this is necessary. This is sort of the idea that I'm working on to produce different kinds of frameworks for different kinds of problems. And some of that is very approachable because you see.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I don't want to. From grounding to communication, we can see as degrees of consciousness. So the grounding is definitely conscious. And then we see as things become consciously present to the phenomenon. So we see unconscious qualities of feelings being perceived, and then presentation, and then things become more than just what they appear, but they represent something else. And they do not only represent something else, but also communicate other than what they represent. So there is this process of being totally unconscious to consciously communicating with the others.
This is a great point, because this is seen diagrammatically from here, because this is the edge. So this is D, so you can have the.
So that's why you cannot share what is unconscious. You can only share what is communicated.
Yeah, we can open the discussion, because that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Two questions. Let me pull that with my start. Okay. Is all phenomena a sign? Like everything that you experience, like, the sound, the light,
Yes.
or does it have to? So my problem with that is, if a sign is something that stands for something else, for some person or thing, how does that stand for a phenomenon that's not being interpreted?
Anything is possibly a sign. So being a realist and taking possibilities as reals. I gave the example of the fossil fish. I don't know if you were here.
Yeah.
Okay. So even a fossil fish that is not being interpreted, so it's not even being perceived, but it is as a potential, as a possibility already assigned in Peirce's term. Because there's this continuum of reality in which everything is at least an icon of anything else. Anything can possibly represent anything else. So even a phenomenon, and even a apparent possibility, which appears as a quality, it is already a possible sign.
I see. Second question, kind of more of a comment / question. It's really interesting when you get into Peirce how his phenomenology is very, like, Heidegger's a phenomenologist in his own way, just like for Husserl, Merleau-Ponty. Heidegger has the concept of Vorhanden versus Zuhanden. It's German for, anyway, he gives the example of, like, one of them is like you grab the hammer and you're swinging it. You don't theoretically, just like what you were saying.
Yeah.
You're not thinking every step of the swing. There's like a presentness to that. But then when something breaks, that's when you switch over to that other mode of perception. So anyway, it's just very interesting that, we had a PhD candidate recently defend, and there's a criticism of phaneroscopy not being equatable to phenomenology. But there are definite overlaps to that. But then even also further, when we get into the level of discourse, that then becomes, we talk about like Foucault or Derrida, like Peirce is kind of interjecting into all these very interesting avenues that other thinkers were as well. So and I'm just saying that it's interesting that you're presenting it this way, because it's kind of making me make these connections.
Yeah, I've always thought about something like Foucault, the power of discourse. It's this downward arrow of the symbols, because it will control us.
Right. Yeah.
So this is something that I'm thinking about also, that this is the connection to program.
You actually didn't put the analytic.
No, because I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So yeah, there is this synthetic
analytic. Yeah, because the analytic way of thinking of sharing is controlling, and the analytical way of thinking of comprehension or understanding is instructing. And the analytical way of thinking of experience is execution. And the analytical way of thinking of perception is action. So you have the perception action cycle, and the experience instructing cycle, understanding in instructing cycle, and then sharing in controlling. So you as a cybernetic system.
Yeah.
So a cybernetic system controls through instructing what must be executed as actions.
That's like Jacobin school.
Yes. Yeah. You can see backwards, like an algorithm, it is doing it analytically. If you go to the good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, which is fundamentally symbolic, the process, how you process symbols in a computer traditionally is by algorithms that control how instructions are being executed as to produce some actions. Right. So you see that the phases can be seen either synthetically or analytically. And when we think about society, like how control is done through norms. So you have laws, norms, and those norms control from top to bottom. So you have new possibilities of norms coming, springing from perception, and they come from bottom towards the top, but you also have those norms that are already in place. And usually you have like in experience the clash. So usually what comes from the top to bottom, what's coming from the bottom to top, they usually crash in experience. So this is where the tension is. That's why experience for pragmatism is so crucial, because things must be resolved in the experience.
That was my question. You just framed it nicely. Is you sort of were framing this as very top down, but I kept thinking about you talking about the tension. So I'm wondering, well, in cause and effect can be considered in terms of constraint. So I can totally imagine. I agree with what you're saying. How does the top can constrain the bottom? But perception and experience also constrain the top.
Yeah, and I think you remember this is based on 66 signs. This is the 66 signs, which just compresses it. So everything that Romanini has talked about is implicit in this.
So for you,
It can be presented in a too much in a
that was my question. My comment on your presentation is you definitely emphasize the top down.
Any contradiction.
66 signs. This is just a compressed
version of it. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't require any semiotic concept.
Can you go back to the 66 with other periods? But okay, you shouldn't have the analytic ones.
No.
Okay. So when you go back to my original table, we can see that the arrow go back to up.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is sort of the most complex, what I've discovered, most complex framework, which doesn't require getting into semiotic concepts.
Yeah.
So we have 10 things, is very like still
widely used
framework. But then you want hardcore. There's the 66 signs, and there are these 11 aspects. This is basically the solenoid if we draw the loops here. But this is just the aspects ordered in the way Romanini does that. So we have three axes. We have the axis of signification, which is the sign, axis of interpretation, and axis of objectification. Now we can produce another classification by collapsing these axes on top of each other. So if we collapse objectification and interpretation, we get 39 signs. And here's the original number of from the 66 signs. So this is our sort of degenerate version 66 signs. But we have only two axes left. If we collapse these, we get 15 signs, which is like sort of a doubly degenerated system. Now we get to Peirce's 10 signs because these are the periods.
This is important because now when you collapse this way, the periods are pretty clearly identified.
These are exactly the periods. Yeah. So this is grounding, like literally, this is grounding period, presentation, representation, and communication. Now if we collapse these two, we get 10 signs from Peirce.
and if we collapse the whole
This is something that he discovered. And it is beautiful because it is mathematically perfect. So I was just expanding, but I never thought of contracting back and see what was happening.
Yeah.
And it geometrically, mathematically, it makes perfect sense.
And if you collapse all, you get 3 signs of per personess per second.
of course.
So like since I'm arguing. And yeah, well, I discovered this because my brain cannot function with this kind of complexity. So I discovered first this and then. But here you can see, like we have the 66 signs, so there are all. So here are the 66 signs. So in the complete, there are all opposite. We collapse, and we have just a portion so that which are there. And 15, this is one. Beautiful.
and then 10 signs, and then
The text. So this is Peirce's original table.
You remember yesterday that we had this, here the qualified icon, Rema, and so we did this. This is Peirce's original table. So this is the three correlates are here. You see?
Here, the three correlates, three fundamental aspects.
And so they're compressed there. And then you have just the categories.
Yeah.
But this is something that you can use if you need sort of a simplified version. Because it is exciting. I think this is a great, right? It is in science.
You have all the phases, you have all the periods.
and yeah, it's very uncomfortable, very good framework. The 39 is also interesting. So we see that we have these groups of 6 signs here.
So these are one of the 6 universal predicants: firstness, secondness, thirdness, secondness of thirdness, firstness of secondness of thirdness, firstness of thirdness, and firstness of secondness. And when we collapse, we have only 3 categories. When we collapse, we have just 1.
So what can we apply this to?
Everything.
Like what are real world like applications where we can go through and classify signs and make?
That's the assignment.
Yeah.
So let's see.
That's the hard one.
Thesis in action.
But in my master's thesis, I sort of conceptualized society through these 15 signs. But basically, you can do anything with this because this is the logic of reality.
But you can choose how many layers you want to work. When you compress, so for this sort of phenomenon that I'm working, I don't need as many layers of complexity. So I can work with those 15 signs. They are, for all practical purposes, enough for the sort of aims or final goals that I'm.
This is just one approach, but I sort of try to apply these frameworks to things by starting with the 4 phrases or the 4 periods. And so trying to go into these things. And when I have a sort of a clearer picture, then I introduce complexity to it. That's one way.
And this is, there is practicality in this process. So if you really analyze mathematically what's going on, it's like the unfolding of those relations in a very practical way.
Yeah, I'm on my website.
Yeah, perfect. I was going to ask you that.
So philosign.com, that's my account name, Philosign. I have this website, and here at the bottom you can find my YouTube channel, my Substack, newsletter, Twitter, and yeah, here you can keep in mind. So this is sort of where I compile everything that I have on this website. So I plan to have some interactive diagrams at some point. I'm not still sure how to implement them or even what I want to achieve with this. Yeah, I know, but like what to do with it. And so this is one part of it, but then I have articles like on philosophy and sociology, from Peircean's perspective, my take on the meaning crisis from a Peircean's perspective, for example. But maybe the most relevant thing to you are my tutorials. I'm planning to write more tutorials, but I have the tutorials on the 3 categories, physics predicaments, introduction to semiotics. Here's sort of the idea of choosing the road. So you can take this kind of a semiotic mindset road, which doesn't use semiotic terms. But then there's the hardcore semiotic road, which will end up hopefully at some point in the future. So this is science, but I try to update this as time. But there's some good resources for semiotics, in my opinion.
How often are you doing your YouTube episodes? Kind of bi-monthly?
Or not even monthly. When I have time, I don't have any. So
I mean, you have quite a lot.
yeah, there are a lot of maybe 30 videos right now, but Both of those. If you want to learn about semiotics, I would say that this is the best place. This is sort of organized in that manner. So, like introduction has all kinds of meditations and when I have doubts, I go to this. I try to write in a very understandable way, you know, so that it's easy to understand, and so yeah. So you can find stuff here. Here about the 4 phases are here, 4 periods are here, and categories are here. Yeah.
What program are you, click on that one, the 3 categories? What program did you use to do that diagram? No.
This is from Wikipedia. It's just an analysis of the 3 categories that any column has hue, chroma, and value. Sort of separate them.
Yeah.
Or inclusive at the same time.
Maybe you can show your YouTube channel.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can see some familiar faces. So yeah, I have all kinds of videos. I have a couple of interviews about Peircean Semiotics, and I have sort of video essays on various topics. You know, amusements of all kinds. So I don't have sort of one thing. Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I have maybe the most sort of used thing is that I have you know, simple tutorial to the 10 signs, which is quite used. So if you're interested in 10 signs, I have a 7-part tutorial on that video. We go through the correlates with practical examples. But you can explore this.
Yeah. I mean, I knew this channel like 2 years ago. I mean, you can probably see some of my comments. I'm like, wow, this is really good. No, that was you. This is definitely one of the deeper, more. I mean, when you look for something else on YouTube, there's not really a whole lot of depth there.
Yeah.
So this is probably one of the best concentrated collections, I think, especially if you want to go in the Peircean direction.
And just to show you, I have this Substack. So this is sort of a newsletter type of thing. I try to write shorter essays about everything. Like here's a sort of a essay why it's so difficult, what you can do about it, and stuff like that. So you can subscribe to this as well. So that email when I publish something.
Why did you choose the spider web for that essay?
Well, yeah, it's sort of a metaphor for Peirce because there is no clear starting point for Peirce.
Internet, I think it's Hindi, like it's a about it's the vertices of every single it's the vertices of where the web connects itself. There's a drop of water. There's a dewdrop, and that dewdrop reflects the entire.
Yeah. That's exactly the point I was trying to make. It's the same idea. We kind of sort of start with you start with something, and then in order to explain that something, you have to refer to that idea. And then you have to refer to that idea, and you have to sort of understand because you have to understand all the separate things and the wholeness at the same time. And that's sort of not doable in a linear way.
It's not exactly. It's not doable in a linear way, and I don't even think Deleuze's rhizome goes far. I think this metaphor does better.
But yeah.
I knew I was going to get a comment on that.
That's just maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm in agreement.
Yeah, here's a versus drawing. Like you get lost in this.
You draw that?
Yeah.
His drawings are very intricate. I mean, just the diagrams alone that he's drawing in all his notebooks are. They're in a museum somewhere, right? I know he has a library in Texas.
I don't know. There's a Twitter channel, or what they call Twitter page of Peirce's doodles, where they just publish.
This is a specific thing, like chaotic system. You see those things like Attractors.
Yeah, it looks like
It looks like.
Photography, sheet of assertion, like one instance of the sheet of assertion, one possible.
Or like the weather, how the weather is organized.
And I.
He was an academic for a short time, but then after that, he became like a maker or some kind of, like his biography is actually very not academic. He was hyper. He was hyper for a couple of years.
He worked in the geodesics with yeah, he did like gravitational maps.
Yeah, but it's normal to feel lost when reading Peirce.
A completely normal experience.
Somewhere in their maze.
Those are the resources you can read.
I'm familiar with if you're interested.
Yeah, questions? Can you go back to your slides? I wanted to ask about the 4 phases. Yeah, so in the 4 phases, is it possible to skip one of them? So when, for example, your example with football, so speaking of myself, I can totally do perception and experience, but I don't understand the rules of the game. But I can totally understand like the ideology. So I think I skipped the understanding. Is it? Yeah, how do you explain that?
Yeah. Oh,
I have no idea how that. I see some people moving around.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, this is something
I continuously make this mistake of trying to classify things too rigidly.
and forgetting like semiosis is continuous and it's messy. And there are many times where like
Trying to
classify the experience. Oh, this is this side, right? This is this side. And then I always bump into all kinds of contradictions because you cannot sort of take a snapshot of semiosis or make it too static. It's living. And there's a difficulty of analyzing it without killing or becoming confused yourself. So skip is a word that implies that isn't there. So I'm going to use that word. But thirdly,
A very interesting question.
Yeah.
This is something because maybe you look at you experience what's going on, and you have some assumptions about the ideology, and then your attention is
mostly here, all the ideology. So not necessarily the detection will be in experience. Maybe there might be the clash might happen in a higher order.
This is something that
I never thought of, but it might.
It's interesting because I would say actually maybe the tension goes down. Like, so if someone understands the game better, there's more opportunity for tension because they're competing. The two, your sides sort of compete with each other. Where she just gets bored because it's like, I don't know. So you don't even really care.
Well,
but the moment she is making this
argument, so the inquiry. So where's the past? Where's the irritation? So your irritation might be, how do I connect those cognitive and ideological and normative assumptions to what I perceive and feel as a collective experience? So at that point, I think the tension that you want to resolve, what must be minimized? It is right here, the understanding how, and this might be a sociological project. This might be like how I start my research project, how the experience of football, soccer, or any other sport might help us to connect some ideological, sociological assumptions. So we might inquiry into those terms. But usually in daily experience, let's say, when we are just living, walking on the street,
we are very much into this phase. That's the phase that we are, it is a privilege to be able to be in this classroom and have this academic opportunity to make higher connections. This is not what people do in general. They just go by their lives. So usually they experience the world. They are living. So they are the information is being processed, and usually the connection happens right here. So that's when the pragmatic effects must take place in society. That's the essence of pragmatism. What sort of real effects come out of our experience in the world? So I would say that in real life, most of the tension is resolved in the experience.
Yeah, but I think it applies to many cases, like not only soccer, but me as a student, when I first started studying Peirce, let's say, I I was lacking that understanding phase, even though I understood the ideology, or I understood how important Peirce is for semiotics. So, and then I started to, approaching the understanding phase only later on. So some continuity, but I think, yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, for me, like the
Here, this is a lot of speaking. Is that we don't have it context dependent.
context independent.
Yeah, but if you are an artist, you're actually the perception phase and all the cues like the grounding, presentation, and representation. The artist wants us not to rationalize so much into the phases, but actually to experience not consciously, aesthetically, what the forms that is provided, and the presentation period, in which the art is the art by itself. So it doesn't have to represent anything, but it just presents itself as a aesthetic possibilities that is unconsciously perceived. So depending on what sort of semiosis we're interested in, like an artist would mostly work his ideas in this perception.
Well, don't do this. I have a comment on the, well, okay, wait.
Yeah. So that an artist would work on the grounding and presentation things.
Can you also maybe explain this in terms of left and right hemisphere? Does it apply to these spaces?
But probably there could be some interesting relations. Some other.
Sorry, just an aesthetic, it's just like a presentation choice, a graphical choice. What I'm so want to split the alternating circles. so that they both can be circles in of themselves, but then the arrow, because you've got arrows hitting each other head on head. That's just in my mind, like from a dynamics perspective. Like it's so you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
I might fix that.
What's that?
I might fix that.
Yeah, no, it's just a suggestion.
No, it's
Yeah, maybe we could have something like this going
Exactly.
this, and then
Yeah. So it's infinite.
Yeah.
Knitted together, but you maintain still the isolation.
It's kind of already there if you look at it the right way.
Yeah.
It's just depending on you.
It's just singularities where the arrow comes down and you have to make a hard turn. Doesn't flow.
So another way to see it is like elements. So you have like the perception and experience, and then understanding, and then sharing. So you can make a whole new series of graphics, seeing layers, concentric layers.
Actually, I mean, your presentation's great, but that could go to this more holistic kind of.
Remember the Russian dolls?
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, the sharing actually has all the others phases in it. So we have to think this is always in terms of the Russian, the Matrioskas dolls. So it's it's difficult when we want to analyze and put in the bidimensional graphics because you lose this idea of wholeness.
Yeah. But when we're all trying to move towards the real, that we all agree Peirce is dealing with, grappling with. Your suggestion is nice in the sense that it communicates the simultaneity of how all these are, like you're saying, like it's a way to not get caught in seeing perception as like in of itself.
Yeah, that's why the solenoid has this more, it depicts a little bit, I think, better the idea of a movement.
Yeah. You could even, sorry, I'm going.
No, I love this.
So I can imagine that you could use transparent, like different levels of transparency. So if you do these bigger and bigger circles, they get more and more transparent. So does that make sense? Like more and more gray. Yeah. So then you keep I think the background of what you've done, but you then capture some of the.
Actually, the best picture I ever made of this relations is like a seashell. A seashell has many layers inside, but also it grows and it grows organically. But this is
What's that noise fundamentally? Like growth patterns. The noise, actually, like the growth patterns of seashell, growth patterns of which is kind of.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, question?
You mentioned that we can use semiotics and like the society that you wrote your master's thesis on the analysis of society. So, did you have something particular?
I was afraid of that question. Well, no, I don't have any answer to any problems. But I think that you're familiar with the term meaning crisis, like that's thing that people talk about in the interwebs, and many times I find that in these discussions, the problem is a sort of inadequacy of the philosophical tools. And when I've been thinking about that, I think we sort of have to go very deep to find sort of a solution. And you have the nice diagram about the architectonic sciences, where you saw that we had, mathematics, phenomenology, philosophy, and philosophy had aesthetics, ethics, logic, and after philosophy comes metaphysics. And I feel that many of these contemporary conversations about what we should do or recognize that something is really like deeply wrong in our philosophical systems and our worldviews, but they are not going beyond metaphysics to solve this problem. And I feel that we have to go all the way to logic to really contemplate what is logic. Because if you think about sort of the classic material determinists people, like Sanders is one example of that. I think that is sort of a derivative of a false conception of logic, which sort of is deductive, digital, sort of, there's no novelty in it. I think it's a sort of false metaphysics is a derivative of a false conception of logic. So when we fix our conception of logic, I think metaphysics will fix itself, and this will have a certain impact, in my opinion. This is just my opinion.
I guess I'm coming from logic's a very loaded term, as you stated, right? Peirce was a logician, though. He's quite literally doing logistic syllogisms and then coming up with his abductive logic. So Sam Peirce is quite literally a byproduct of logic, right? Like those systems eventually turned into modal logic, which turned into computational logic, which turned into logic.
It depends what you mean by logic.
Right. But I would just say, like, Sam Peirce is like, I don't think they're really is different in their usage of logic. Maybe
I disagree with that, because semiotic and logic is so very different than sort of a syllogistic.
I guess I still don't understand your distinction of logic that's distinctive from what other history of logic is. How is it different?
Well,
It's based on
aesthetical judgments. And that's part of logic.
Romanini could answer this much better.
Of course, what novel ideas he's bringing? Well, many. First of all, he started as a symbolist. So deductive and traditionally analytic logic was his starting point. And then he found contemporaneously of Peano and to a certain extent the idea that we need indexes or pure seconds to point out what is the subject of the logical relation. What is it?
Referentiality.
Quantification. So when you have quantifiers in logic, like there is something or all things are, so those quantifications are basically, if you go from the syllogistic logic to algebraic logic, those quantifications is fundamental to go to predicate logic. So you don't have predicate logic without quantification. So this is something that Peirce identified with his student Mitchell, and then later he moved to a iconic logic, which is existential graph. So the logic of two relations, the continuity of predicates. So the continuous predicates that is the basis of any logic. So this iconic logic implies a aesthetics of logic. So what Peirce is saying is that in the end, it must feel the truth of a proposition. Much more than understand symbolically, you should be able to immediately see and feel that the proposition is true by the relations you are able to picture using a graphic logic. So you see, he's moving from a very symbolistic logic towards a more iconic one. And this iconic logic is much more metaphysical because icons, they are not discrete. Icons, they don't have borders. Icons, they are possibilities. So it is a logic of possibilities, which is much richer than the traditional syllogistic logic of just play around with symbols.
Actually, just to plug my own model at this point, what you just described nicely characterizes superposition.
Exactly.
That's constructive and deconstructive interference of literally doing operations.
So that's the base of where it is, looking about with all those.
Yeah.
That's the logical base.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
Any other questions?
So maybe we can conclude this comment.
Ludmila, maybe.
Simon was to make an assignment for them.
Yeah. So you want
Every line.
open the fire? Did I get killed? Jesus. So it's a very simple assignment, actually. So we have discussed this idea of a semantic, which is what Raninen is proposing, the idea that I'm going to go a little bit to the diagram. So this idea that information must be always factual and true to start with. So you can never have information if it is not well-formed, semantic, factual, and true. So this puts a lots of constraints and limitations to the idea of information. So, and we have Peirce's notion of information that we have discussed during the last days, that we have this idea that information is a relation between extension and comprehension. So we had seen and discussed this. So what I want to do is to think to picture a problem that you are part of a team advising a local government on whether to implement a new urban mobility app that gets real-time data from citizens to public transportation routes. The app collects user feedback, GPS data, and commuting patterns. So you see, it is a dynamic process. That's what Peirce calls a dynamic object, reality. So things are happening. And in those sorts of problems, which can be chaotic, sets of relations that are moving constantly, and in time, the patterns can change. Like Christmas time, you see the Christmas market, maybe cars can go there because now things have changed. So you don't have what is true or false as a given. You have dynamic possibilities. So you must think of the idea of information and representation of those information in a much more conscious way. So that doesn't mean that Florida's notion of information is not valid or nor useful. Actually, to some aspects, to use semantic information in the sense that Florida is proposing can be a short route towards your more specific goals. But maybe you can implement a much better app if you think of information in this dynamic and relational aspect. So I want you to think about this. So how does Peirce's strategic model assign object interpretant help evaluate the informational value of the data collected? According to how the criteria of well-formed semantics and truthfulness determine whether the app provides meaningful and actionable information. Based on your analysis, explain how each framework might lead to different insights or priorities deciding whether the app or not. Okay. So then we have the understanding of the cognitive capacities. So we have the analytical phases, control, instruction, execution. Then you have synthetic phase, perception, experience, comprehension. So we have this circuits, perceiving, action, experience, executing, we have talked about. So by integrating these capacities into systems like a mobility app, it is possible to create a tool that not only reacts to immediate challenges, but also evolves by learning from data and user interaction. So you see, both things are happening, and what we want is that when the driver experiences driving, so that's where the tension is. When the driver has a problem in front of him, so the app should bring the routes and patterns that were previously as a repertoire, but also what the app is perceiving, collecting as data that is coming into through different users. So this is the perspective, and actually every user must experience the app in an optimum way. So the question is how a citizen should experience the app throughout these possibilities. So building on described analysis of Florides, how could these capacities guide the app's development to balance immediate problem solving to long-term adaptability, identify these three capacities to describe how they would be applied in design, implementation, evaluation of the app, propose a feedback loop mechanism. They incorporate, this is pretty obvious from the talk we just had. And finally, design a semiotic campaign of public engagement using Peirce's theory of signs, icons, indexes, design, and informational campaign to encourage citizens to actively participate. So this is the communication challenge. And we have to convince our citizens that they should participate in this, in providing their information and making contributions to the app so everyone could take profit of it. So I have here versus some texts. I provide links to some of the literature about it, so to read this information, and I should add also your website here. Raninen. And that would be the philosophy. And it would be HTTPS.
Are we going to get a copy of this assignment to like email to us or?
So write down your website here. Write it down. Come here.
It's just.
So you have out, it's interesting in working groups, at least 2 people working together, maximum 4. There would be, I think, between 2 and 4. So you can discuss those ideas and it should be difficult. You don't have to elaborate too much because as Markus has already emphasized, actually, by making things more simple, less complex, maybe it is the best way to achieve better goals. So you don't have to use the 66 classes of science, but maybe thinking about the phases and periods and how specific science could have a role in helping us think about the problem, that would be great. What do you think?
Yeah, so is it clear? What's the task? So you will work in groups and so let's give her like a deadline.
Yes.
That's the point that you will send your assignment to my email by December 17th, which is like the tapas to be did, so you will begin tapas for this.
I'd like to have the answers when you
Of course, and then I share it with Professor Romanini, and he can then give you feedback to it.
Where can this form be accessible?
So I will this document. I will send it to students enrolled in PZB course and my semiotics course. Are you enrolled?
I'm enrolled, but I still think it'll be fun to.
Yeah. You're very welcome.
Well, first you have to tell them that it's with, if you have free time.
Exactly. After the night, I will.
So it should be fun. I mean, this is, we would like semiotic theory to be applicable to real problems. And I think this is the sort of real problems in our society that semiotics could maybe help us to think of the problem. Not definitely find a precise solution, but maybe contribute to the possible solution.
All right, that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Albert.
Yeah, we.
I'll